rarely use notes, but I thought maybe the strain of truth probably would be appropriate today. So different from what I usually do. Okay. It's a real pleasure to have Bill Goldstein here. Bill is the 12th director of the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. He also serves as the president of Lawrence Livermore National Security LLC, the company which oversees the laboratory. He leads a workforce of approximately 6,000 employees and manages current annual operating budget of about $1.5 billion. As lab director, he shares with the directors of Los Alamos and San Diego the responsibility of providing the president, through the Secretary of Energy and Defense, an annual institutional statement and assessment of the state of the nuclear weapons stockpile in terms of safety, security, and effectiveness, and whether confidence in the stockpile can be maintained without a nuclear test. Goldstein has more than 30 years' experience in the laboratory, serving in a variety of managerial roles. He served as Deputy Director for Science and Technology, tasked with leading the strategic deployment of the laboratory's science and technology capabilities, and as Associate Director for Physical and Life Sciences. I remember a great conversation with Bill when he set that directorate up, and as always, you try to figure out how do you name it. And so we kicked it around and thought Physical and Life Sciences is pretty good. And he says, yes, but the acronym can be pronounced, please. I think he and I were the only two that thought of that, so he got away with it. There he had responsibility for a broad range of physics research and development, medical physics and biophysics, chemistry, optical sciences and instrumentation, and high energy density physics. Goldstein led the creation of the Jupiter Laser Facility, and in 2006 oversaw completion of Titan, a unique new Jupiter Laser Facility. He was postdoctoral research associate at Stanford Linear Accelerator. He received his doctorate in theoretical physics from Columbia University in New York, and his bachelor's degree in physics from Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania. He's a member of the American Physical Society and on the board of directors of the National Science Foundation Center for Biophotonics, Science and Technology at UC Davis. He's received numerous awards and has authored more than 70 papers in the fields of elementary particle theory, nuclear physics, atomic physics, X-ray physics, and plasma spectroscopy. Now, what's so special is the word snuck out to the laboratory that we were singing better and better here, and we're doing custom songs. So the laboratory, in its usual subtle way, came to me, i.e. the dean called me up, and said, I think when you introduce the director of the lab, you should do something new. You should have an overture. So we have an overture for Bill Goldstein.
There's antimony, arsenic, aluminum, selenium, and hydrogen, and oxygen, and nitrogen, and radium, and nickel, neodymium, neptunium, germanium, and iron, americium, uranium, europium, zirconium, lutetium, and vanadium, and lanthanum, and osmium, and hexapain, and radium, and gold, potassium, indium, and indium, and gallium, and iodine, and thorium, and thulium, and thallium. For LLNL, they named one livothorium. There are many others, but we won't go on ad nauseum. Okay.
And with apologies to Tom Larry. Bill, the stage is yours.
So, let's see, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I'd like to give the another hand to that superb I can't believe we got through all those elements. That was just terrific. Apropos the first offering, those of you, also those of you who have been at the lab know that my schedule is completely kept by my administrative assistant. So the fact that I'm never there is only the case because she doesn't want me there. So I can't imagine. So it's nice to hear the song because I never hear that at the laboratory. By the way, my administrative assistant is Corinne Larson, who some of you may know, without whom I probably wouldn't have gotten here or any place, including back home at the end of the day, or any place that when I'm not at the lab. I want to just note that since Alan Alda came up earlier, Alan Alda has a tremendous interest in science, and one of his hobbies is actually one of his passions is talking about science and getting the word out about science to the general population. He does a terrific job of that. The other thing is about Kurt Vonnegut. I think I'm right about this, remembering back, he was a trained chemist, in fact, before he became a very famous author. So I don't know if you chose those two people because I was going to be here, but it makes me feel very welcome to have them talked about for me. Okay, so good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me here. Thanks very much for lunch. I want to start by conveying my appreciation and admiration for all the service and assistance that you provide in the community and around the world. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity to talk about Livermore Laboratory, which has been a part of this community. I looked it up for only slightly less time than the Rotary Club has been. We were established in 1952. We were established in 1952 at the former site of the Livermore Naval Air Station. And one of the most significant aspects of that actually is that until something like 15 years ago, I couldn't put my finger on the exact date, we were actually able to host community swims at the swimming pool where the naval aviators got to practice rescue operations at sea. Of course, the pool's now gone due to the inexorable effects of aging, but the lab is continually refreshed by new, superbly talented people who come here. And I have to say that the decision many people make to come to the laboratory is made very much easier by the vibrancy and amenities that are provided in this community, a vibrancy that everybody in the community is part of. So let's see, continuing the vital statistics, as Jay mentioned, in, by the way, the long version of my biography, I'm not sure why you chose that one. There's a much shorter one, but I appreciated it. About 6,000 employees. I didn't have a chance to find out exactly how many of those people live in Livermore. I know many of them do. I do know because your new state senator, Senator Fraser, I think.
Laser.
I'm sorry, Blazer, yes, was at the laboratory on Monday, and I know that in his district, of those 6,000 or so people, almost 3,500 of them actually live in his district. And we have an annual budget of about $1.5 billion, most of which comes from the federal government, some of which comes from the state and actually from the private sector, from industry that comes to the lab for things that we can help them with. That makes us actually the third largest laboratory amongst the 17 that are in the Department of Energy Network, Department of Energy National Laboratories, right after Sandia and Los Alamos. So we were founded under the auspices of the University of California, and our character very much reflects those origins. We're here to do large-scale, sometimes called big science, to do it through the formation of multidisciplinary teams involving scientists, engineers, technicians, operations people, and I suspect that many of you have had the opportunity to be part of those teams, and to do things that have national importance and national impact. And again, that really reflects in important ways are the foundational, our origin story, if you will. And so pictured here are the three people who are really most responsible for founding the lab, E.O. Lawrence, Edward Teller, and Herb York. And I'd also say that the lab continues aspirationally to represent the university's values of public service, research, and education. Now, the first director of the lab, Herb York, who's the fellow on your right there, actually made it very clear that in his view the lab was being set up to be a new ideas laboratory. And this commitment to new ideas and real innovation has driven the lab ever since. I think it still characterizes very much the way we think of what we do. And it's served the nation very, very well. Manifested itself in exceptional contributions to the nation's security. Two examples are shown here, I like to think of as two kind of bookends, including the revolutionary, actually somewhat audacious development of nuclear warheads that could fit on submarines, a development that's really defined the nature and character of nuclear deterrence ever since that development. And more recently, the development of a innovative precision lethality, low collateral damage munition. So this is a new concept weapon that has the character that it has effects that don't go any further than basically exactly 10 yards from where the explosion is. And the demand for this kind of capability came from the field. I think I'm not supposed to say exactly which field, but you can look at the year and sort of guess. Where the issue really was protecting our soldiers from fire in close quarters situations. And it actually works. It was delivered from concept in response to an urgent need to delivery to use in the field in under 18 months, which was a remarkable accomplishment in terms of technology and engineering, but also a remarkable accomplishment in terms of the cycle time for acquiring new weapons in the current Pentagon that we deal with, but that's a different story. Let's see. So along the way, from here to there, the lab conceived of and initiated, along with partner laboratories, Lawrence Berkeley Lab and Los Alamos, in fact, the three labs together, started the Human Genome Project, which laid the foundation for the genomic revolution, which we're all now experiencing the benefits of. And the lab also introduced the first global circulation computer models, which were the origin, which led to the field of global climate modeling, which is so pertinent today in both in debates that take place and in understanding the impacts on the environment and where we're going in energy. Let's see. Since given I have to follow up on that wonderful song and mention another, I think, particularly significant accomplishment during the span of our work was the discovery of several new elements, but in particular the naming 3 years ago now, I guess, of what I like to call the weightiest element on the periodic table, because it is actually at the top, number 116, which was named Livermorium in honor of the laboratory, in honor of the town, and puts us all. If you think about it, we're there for the ages now. On the periodic table, every child will learn about this. One interesting side note to that remarkable event, I would say, is that this Livermorium was actually discovered by a team from the lab, a team of nuclear scientists in the laboratory working closely together with a team in Russia of nuclear scientists, and it was actually using an accelerator in Russia at the Nuclear Research Center in Dubna. And there was a whole process that's gone through to both validate that a new element was discovered and also to validate, to ascribe the discovery to a group, which then gets the naming rights. Two elements were actually discovered and validated at the same time, and all I can say is thank God for that, because if it had only been one, it could have been another Cold War that might have broken out in Russia. There was no way that that was going to be resolved. In fact, the negotiations on naming are kept very close, but I understand the Russians going into position was that both of them should be named after Russians. Let's see, so our mission space today spans nuclear security, domestic and international security, and energy and environmental research and development, and we carry these out through a robust space of science, engineering, and computing capability that we use to basically assure that we can apply the frontiers of science and technology to our nation's challenges. Nuclear security is our largest program and our highest priority mission. Through our work in this area, and Jay referred to this, but it really, you have to take a minute to think about how profound this is. Along with Los Alamos, we've been able to assure, since 1992, to assure the nation, and really, in some sense, the President directly, of the safety, security, and reliability of the nuclear deterrent, without, and explicitly stating, without the need to return to nuclear testing. And that's despite the fact that all of these systems are being relied on well past their design lifetimes. The success in stockpile stewardship really has entailed an exceptional paradigm shift for this program and for the laboratory from an era of testing, nuclear designing and testing, to much greater emphasis on research and development and understanding basic science aimed at getting a fundamental understanding of the very unique and extreme kinds of physics and chemistry and science that are taking place in nuclear weapons. And these the requirement to do this very much has established at the laboratory unique, one-of-a-kind kinds of capabilities in the world, including, as I'm showing here, the Natural Ignition Facility, which is the largest, most powerful laser in the world, and the Sequoia supercomputer, which, when actually fielded, was the most powerful computer in the world. It's now, Truth in Advertising, number 3 on that list, after one of the other national labs. I can't remember the name of it. It's in Oak Ridge, though, Tennessee, and China, which has the top of the list. However, I can assure you that by 2017, or early 18, within the next couple of years, we will regain that title, and we will again have the fastest, most powerful computer in the world at Livermore. That's been announced by the Department of Energy and actually funded. I was trying to find a analogy for this paradigm shift that's taken place at the lab, and one that came to mind was the change from kind of desktop computing to mobile computing. So none of you have desktop computers anymore, right? Except for that one there, I noticed. Everybody does it on their phone, and some companies made that shift almost, actually, took advantage of it and have been very successful, like Apple, for example. And then there's companies like Microsoft that, not so much. So I like to say so we like Apple. That's been the level of our success in making this change, and it has been a huge change. Of course, nuclear security is more than just nuclear weapons. It includes critical work that the lab has done really throughout its history in non-proliferation, treaty monitoring, and counterterrorism. And there's, it's been a very recent, very profound example of that, of the lab providing support in this area, which has been in the event of the Iran negotiations that have been taking place, and actually have recently been successful in coming up with an agreement. So this requires a little bit of background. If you've been following that, you may have heard the term breakout time, which is the time that's ascribed to how long it would take Iran to develop, to generate enough special nuclear material to make one weapon. It's breakout time that's actually been threaded throughout this. In some sense, it was the fact that that breakout time had been reduced in estimates down to 2 months, around a year ago. That has driven all sorts of calls to action, including the negotiations. I'll just tell you that reduction, that estimate of 2 months, and the reduction down to 2 months is actually a product that the laboratory produces. That's one of the things that we produce for the nation. And over the course of the negotiations, we had people in Europe, in Geneva and in Vienna, working in close support to those negotiations, actually on the phone back to people here running simulations to provide numbers for that breakout time based on various scenarios that were on the negotiating table. A very recent, I think very salient example of the kind of support, kind of expertise that the lab has, and the kind of support that can be provided to our nation. Finally, I'd like to kind of wrap up by expanding just a little bit on our role in the community, which includes a significant amount of educational outreach, both K through 12 to the community colleges, also to universities, including UC, state college system, state university system. In fact, I'd love to mention that we have a very, very vibrant program training veterans along with Las Positas College, and actually bring them to the lab for resident practicals as part of their the program that they're doing at Las Positas, as well as charitable support. And I'd especially like to highlight our recent participation in the national My Brother's Keeper program, which is sponsored by the White House. About 3 weeks ago, we hosted around 100 middle school students from San Francisco, Oakland, Alameda County, and some Central Valley school districts for a day of science demonstrations and tours at the lab. It was a terrific event. I think the students had a tremendous time. A bunch of our people were involved in it, had a wonderful time. It was great for me to interact with them. I don't have time to... There's a great video, which I'd love you to go look up. I'm not going to show it here. I don't really have time. But if you just Google My Brother's Keeper Livermore, look for the YouTube video. It features actually President Obama to start giving a call out to the for this event. So if you get a chance, take a look at it. I'd also like to just mention our involvement in iGate. It's a state-sponsored technology and startup incubator, technology hub and startup incubator, where we partner with Sandia Laboratory, Sandia Livermore Lab, and local governments and companies to help power economic development in the region. And this kind of started from nothing about 4 years ago, I think, something like that. And it's now got its own space in downtown Livermore and is, in some sense, really taken off. There's actually companies that are coming out of this concept. And I'll just mention, in closing, in the future, we're hoping to supercharge this kind of interaction and relationship through the Livermore Valley Open Campus. This is a piece of the site that we've set aside in the southeast corner to better more robustly bring the unique innovation culture and capabilities of the lab and the people working at the lab into interactions with the private sector, with academia, both locally and also with the international science and technology community, while in the process strengthening our ability to deliver new solutions for national security and for the progress of our nation. So with that, I'd like to thank you again for having me, and be happy if there's time to answer a question or two.
Just a quick question. I'm wondering how the relationship with Dubna has evolved considering the political changes in Russia.
And the U.S., by the way.
Yes.
The question, please?
So the question was, has the scientific collaboration with Dubna evolved owing to the change in political circumstances in Russia and in the interactions that we have in Russia? The answer is yes. There's been a bit of a freeze on relationships with Russia generally in many areas, and unfortunately that has included very much what were growing interactions between the national security laboratories in the U.S. and the national security laboratories in Russia. That really began at the end of the Cold War and had been increasing for a decade and a half, two decades or so. And those are basically now in abeyance, really suspended. Dubna is not a national security laboratory, and in fact, it would be possible through some hard work to continue those interactions. It turns out that they are in the process of building a more energetic accelerator with which they hope to go beyond element 116 eventually. So there's not much going on there. So the combination of that fact plus the general kind of freeze in relationships has had an impact on that collaboration.
Thanks, Bill. I wondered if you could expand on your perspective about thoughts on education for young people, particularly in science and technology, and prospects for their economic success in today's emerging global and academic environment.
I'm not an expert on those topics. From our point of view, our mission success depends on having a highly qualified scientific and technical workforce for us to draw staff from. That is that's a tremendous challenge. Certainly, as long as I've been at the lab, and increasingly so, we see what I'm sure many of you know, which is that many of those people, whether educated abroad or from the United States, are not U.S. nationals when they come out of college or graduate school. So that's an extra challenge for us, given the kind of work that we do. And it actually means that one of the things we have to do is we hire many foreign nationals and actually have them work at the lab until they become citizens and contribute more broadly in our mission areas. But it's very important for us to have a strong, wide open pipeline of people into these fields, and we realize that if you only start to capture people when they're in college or graduate school, it's too late. The pool is already limited. It's already too small in some sense. We need kids being educated earlier, catching interest in science, staying in those fields. Too many are just lost from that, and so I know there's a limited amount we can do there, But as much as we can do, we have to do for our own, the success of the laboratory. So on how important it is for them and their economic future to become, knowledgeable in science and technology. Well, let me say first, I think it's important for the country for them to do that, because it's so sad actually to see the amount of the lack of knowledge about science and technology and how that impacts some of the national discussions that take place. It doesn't help that people are not, that there's ignorance on these things. And as for those people, I think it's, I tried to get my own kids to go into science, but I failed, so I recognize that.
Bill, I wanted to ask about other missions for NIF that are currently being funded besides weapons effects simulation.
So it's interesting you put it that way. So actually, weapons effects simulation is one of the other missions, which it's doing. So it's actually was designed to simulate what happens inside a weapon, in some sense. It turns out it's also very useful to simulating what comes out of a weapon and what that can do. There's all sorts of exotic things that those things that come out of the weapon can do. And so one of the things that we do for the Department of Defense actually is to look at some of those effects using GIF. We also look at nuclear forensics is another. So this is the study of, God forbid a terrorist weapon goes off, a terrorist nuclear weapon goes off, how or anyone that we don't know who set it off. Is there a way to trace it back to where it came from? And it turns out NIF is very useful for doing studies in that area. So that's another thing that we're doing there for the Department of Defense. Furthermore, the fact that NIF was designed to simulate what happens inside a nuclear weapon, it turns out it also makes a very good simulator for what's happening in the center of the sun, in supernovae, in the center of giant planets. And so we're exploring science at pressures and temperatures that can be accessed nowhere else on Earth. And discovering new things about matter, new things about astrophysics by doing that. And finally, NIF was originally designed to achieve ignition. That's not been achieved yet, but we still expect it to be achieved at NIF. Once ignition is achieved, it starts to open up the potential for this unique, this kind of energy production that has incredibly unique aspects to it. Fusion energy, which, if achieved, will sort of change the way we, all the economics around energy use.
Thank you.
Given the very many pathways that are being pursued for enhanced energy capability for the nation, what is your personal view of which one is the winner?
Well, natural gas at the moment appears to be the current champion. It can't be the whole story. So, interestingly enough, if you asked me 10 years ago, I wouldn't have put things like wind energy on the list, but wind energy is actually becoming somewhat economical now in some cases. And other forms of renewable energy are actually starting to move in terms of cost. They're closer to the fossil fuels that we're most used to. I think a big part of the challenge in making these, eventually having these play as large a role as they might in our energy use is actually the storage problem, which is a very big problem, and one that the National Lab Network is working very hard on, and work is happening in Livermore on that. But it's hard for me not to at least nod at the potential for fusion to play to be the ultimate game changer. You know, I can only look forward to maybe in my lifetime, we'll be starting down that path to actually producing it as part of the energy economy. But we have work to do yet together.
Could you touch on the challenge of computer security?
Yeah, sorry, if I'm not repeating the question, just someone reminded me, so it should be the official reminder. So touch on the challenge of computer security. This is one of the great challenges of our time. I don't know what to say about how I perceive it getting better or becoming, or whether there's really a solution to it that's at hand. It's impacting us right now, the laboratory right now, in a huge way. By the way, I should mention that the lab, although we are well aware of hundreds of probes a day into the laboratory, people trying to basically break into the lab's computer networks. We have been very successful in protecting the lab's networks from any kind of compromise. Having said that, it's kind of only a matter of time before some kind of compromise takes place. The lab has in place everything from sort of defense in depth to, of course, protecting the most important information, classified information, things like that, with air gaps and just no connection to the internet. So there are ways of securely protecting information. But if you were a customer at Target, I don't know what to tell you. Whether that's going to, whether the solutions are going to appear to those sorts of vulnerabilities, given the fact that the world is getting more and more connected and the internet is more and more pervasive. Some of you probably know, if you don't, the Office of Personnel Management, which handles all of the clearance investigations around the country, was for some reason, I don't know, had this stuff available to a foreign country. And I'm not supposed to tell you what country that is, but if you need the paper, you go. Just boggles the mind. It's just amazing. And it's a huge issue for our people and for anyone who's anyone's got a security clearance since 2000 had a security investigation. The simple fact of the matter is, there are ways to protect against that. It wasn't being done. Hopefully this was a wake-up call for the government, for many other places in the government. Computer security is cybersecurity is a growing area at the lab. We have a lot to offer in terms of solutions. Many of those involve just knowing what's going on the network and being able to respond to it. That in and of itself is a real challenge, given the ramifications, the branching, the fact that networks are dynamic and new things are being added and taken away all the time. But in fact, that's part of the thing that we're actually addressing and looking at ways to simulate that dynamism and actually using knowledge of that to make predictions about how networks are going to behave, where they're most vulnerable, and basically be able to stick a finger in the dike before they become floods. There are ways to do that. It's active research.
You noted that the lab had a role in the negotiations with Iran leading up to the treaty. If the treaty ultimately survives and is implemented, would the lab play a role in any of the ongoing activities that would be required under the verification parts of that? Do you see a role? Is that something that the labs see as part of their mission overall?
So no question about it. That is part of our mission. We provide ongoing support through a number of programs to the IAEA, which would have the responsibility for monitoring and verification. So we provide both technology, training, and actually we have people on station. We had headquarters.
Vienna.
Vienna.
Yeah, that's what I thought. With IAEA, so yeah, that will be a continuing, that's part of what we do now. So thank you very, very much.
I have something for you here.